Next, we want to talk about that, disease control. You see, there is greater globalization, scientific innovations, and technological advances of the 21st century in particular, and the world as a result and its inhabitants are more interconnected than ever before. Well, this is good, right? It's good for trade, it's good for exchange of products, goods and services. It has also come with increasing challenges to national, regional, and global health security. Now, at the end of a 5-day rigorous exercise, which is likely to include plenary sessions, document review, and site visits around the country, scores will be allocated to Nigeria using the JEE 3.0 tool to determine the country's preparedness and response capabilities towards national, regional, and global public health events. Nigeria's second joint external evaluation is scheduled to take place from the 14th to the 18th of August 2023. And of course, you know that it was scheduled, I meant to say. But let's have this conversation this morning with Dr. Ifede Adetifa, who is the Director General, Nigeria Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Doc.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let me ask you this rather interesting question. How has it been being the General Officer commanding control disease in Nigeria?
I wouldn't quite put what I do in the way you've described it, but I understand what you're asking. It has been a privilege and an honor for me to be given the opportunity to serve my country in this capacity. But it has been challenging. It has been interesting in equal measure as well. And it has been basically like being on a roller coaster. There's always something going on and something to be concerned about. So sometimes it's difficult to find some period of peace or calm in between disease outbreaks or in between what you need to do to prepare for the next anticipated outbreak. But overall, I took this job because of the challenge and for the opportunity to help make a difference in my country, and I still feel the same way about the reasons for which I took this position.
Well, the nation most certainly appreciates your commitment and your sacrifices. But let's talk about this joint external evaluation in Nigeria. What does it mean, really? Give us a background.
Okay, so Nigeria signed up to something called the International Health Regulations, and you may have heard of IHR 2005. Basically, the IHR or International Health Regulations are a legal framework that gives guidance on what member states of the WHO are supposed to implement or to do, or the standards they are supposed to meet, so as to achieve a resilient health system and have a robust national health security that not only assures the security of the population that the government serves, but also protects regional and global health security. So now those regulations, in terms of spelling out obligations which countries have to meet, also provide a means of monitoring the compliance of countries in meeting those obligations. And there are several ways by which this is done, and one of them is what is called the joint external evaluation. The joint external evaluation measures national status and progress in achieving IHR core capacities. And more importantly, it allows countries to identify the most urgent capacity building needs within their health system or health security system, and then informs the development and the revision of national action plans for health security, because it basically allows you to identify your priorities to act on in order to build up capacity in the thematic areas that are looked at, which typically are prevent, to detect, and to respond to public health challenges or health security challenges. And then there's a fourth thematic area that looks like at other threats, for example, radiation events or chemical events and the like. Back to you.
Okay. Well, interesting. Then, would you say that we have made significant progress, as a country? In what ways have we made progress? In what ways have we been challenged? I'm actually concerned more because when we talk about Nigeria, we're essentially talking about the various federating units in the country. So, in what ways have we scaled up? In what ways are we challenged? Part of this, conversation about JEE.
Well, I think Nigeria has made progress so far. The achieving or assuring national health security is a journey, not something that happens overnight. So just like you don't expect a tree to grow overnight, you don't expect any country to achieve all national health security goals overnight. And I think we all, as the entire world, received a rude awakening, or we were humbled by the COVID-19 pandemic that showed that even those countries that were thought to be doing very well in terms of what they have put in place for health security were still vulnerable to public health threats like a large outbreak or like the pandemic. So Nigeria's journey in terms of the health security has been a progressive one. Obviously, in 2005, Nigeria decided to sign up for the adoption of the international health regulations. In 2017, we conducted the first external joint evaluation exercise. Following that and the gaps that were identified, we developed a national action plan for health security for the period 2018 to 2023. 2 years after the first joint external evaluation, we conducted a midterm JEE just to calibrate implementation and to see if we needed any further tweaks. And it's instrumental that JEE was done just before COVID really broke in many parts in Nigeria and in many parts of Africa. And the outcome for that also helped us in terms of preparing for the COVID response. And now, 5 years later, after the National Action Plan for Health Security was developed, we have taken the option of evaluating the progress so far or the lack thereof with a view of providing a means or arriving at a prescription that would allow us to either self-calibrate or indeed identify priorities for us to implement over the next 5 years. And it comes at an opportune moment because we've had a transition in government. We have new Ministry of Health or other ministries' leadership coming in next week. And what they are going to get a list of priority areas that can be aligned with government objectives for health to assure our health security. Now, for those that tend to look for, who might consider this an exam and want to look at whether people scored F9 or credits or distinctions, in 2017, the JEE score. So I should explain that what the JEE does is that it looks at 56 indicators in 19 technical areas, and it assesses each of these for whether there is no capacity, which is the worst score, whether there is limited capacity, which is number 2, whether we have developed capacity, which is 3, and whether there is demonstrated capacity, which is 4, and the highest score is given when for the particular area that is being looked at or indicator, it is concluded that there is sustained capacity. So when the first JE was done in 2017, we scored 39%, which basically, and as brutally honest as that was in terms of feedback, was a failing grade in terms of the country not being ready to respond to health security threats. I'm pleased to announce that in 2023, at the end of this week, when the JE was concluded, our score is now 54%, which means we now have a passing grade in all thematic areas and in almost all indicators that were assessed. So this is not the NCDC's result. This is the result of the cumulative investment by government at national and sub-national levels, by partners in the health security space. And I think that it is worthy of celebration, given where we have come from, but also means that it's not time to be complacent, that we need now to look at what needs to be done and to move this towards a more, for want of a better description, distinction type grade.
Okay, because I was actually going to ask you, how we fared in what our grades are in 2023. I'm glad that we passed. At least there is no, yes. I mean, it's a good one, but I mean, you didn't mention that in 2019, for instance, we scored 46%, and now we have found ourselves scoring above 50%. But then it only begs the question of, whether or not you think we are moving a little too slowly up the ladder. So the question that I would like to ask is are we lacking the buy-in of high-level officials of government, or even the buy-in of the people themselves? Where are we lacking buy-in, and how important do you think it is?
Well, I think the important thing is to remind us that health security, even if there's health in it, is not just the concern of the ministries of health or health authorities at national and state level. Health security requires all of government and all of people participation, collaboration, and attention. Okay, so this is why a significant effort needs to go into trying to raise the scores from one level to the other. It's not just the health sector that is assessed. It's not just the NCDC that is assessed. It's not just states that are assessed. And the assessment is for national capability, which means even if everything is okay, for example, in Abuja at national level, but it is not at subnational level, we will be ranked very low. Okay, so in terms of buying, as I've said, this requires an all-of-government approach, requires an all-of-people approach, and there is all that this points out is that we still have some way to travel in terms of all of the collaborative work and commitment that is required to assure our health security. So we need to do more work in terms of coordination between all of the ministries, departments and agencies that are required to coordinate and collaborate in terms of health security. We need, as the NCDC has identified and has been saying, we need to invest in subnational strengthening, because we will only be as strong as our weakest link. So it doesn't matter if one state, two states are centers of excellence. we will still be susceptible to threats if there are other states that are doing poorly. So what we expect to do is to continue to work on commitment by all who need to be involved. Government has historically put in more money into health security than they've ever done before, which is commendable. That needs to continue, and that investment needs to even increase further. We need subnational strengthening. We're already focusing on this, but even more will need to be done in this space. And I think that everybody, especially in the aftermath of COVID-19, and recognizing that a health threat is a national security threat, an economic threat, recognition that everything that happens, even in the environment, with animals, are all likely to threaten human health. I think we are preaching to the converted here. We just need to remind people to match their words with actions, and then we need to bring to bear more investments. For example, you know, the challenges we have with healthcare worker attrition brought us down in terms of health workforce. So it's just to highlight that many things that are going on across the country in various sectors related to health security that are not immediately apparent to us as connected to health also affect our JE scores. For example, even financing.
My apologies. Interestingly, I mean, quite some work has been done since 2005, you know, from the chart that we saw earlier, and the milestones, you know, are also there for all to see. But I find one of the thematic areas, I mean, look at this chart, for instance, all through from 2005 down until 2020, on to 2023, the journey so far, the JEE milestones of Nigeria are quite there for all to see. But then there's one that I find very interesting. When you looked at the thematic areas, in 2017, under the thematic area of prevention, we scored 39%, but in 2023, we scored 50%. And I feel, permit me, I mean, you know, help me understand if where I'm getting it wrong. This has to do a lot more with the people, you know, in preventing this. Malaria, for instance, there are things people should not do. There is a limit to what government can do, even at the local government area. How can we increase the figures right there in terms of prevention? What do the people need to know and do so that we can prevent diseases more than we are doing currently?
It's a very good question. For example, some of the technical areas under prevention relate to even the legal instruments, like the laws that we have for public health. One of the major jumps that Nigeria made in terms of the gaps in the legal instruments was to sign into law the acts that established the NCDC. Now, there are other laws that are waiting presidential assent. For example, I know that the Public Health Emergency Bill, the Port Health Services Bill, and things where the work on those bills were concluded with the last National Assembly, and they are waiting presidential assent. So I think these and other laws, once assented to by the president, will actually give us a significant jump in our scores under legal instruments. But it's not just national laws. We also need more states to amend their own public health laws in alignment or in response to the assessment of state public health laws that have been done, and to also develop their own health security plans. We have problems with interventions to prevent the emergence of multi-drug resistant organisms. So when the ongoing process to develop the next national action plan on national antimicrobial resistance plan is concluded and implemented as proposed, we will have a significant jump in that area. And if I give another example, In that area, we've got the need to prevent zoonotic diseases. We scored really badly there because we are not doing very well on sanitary animal production practices. And I'm sure I don't need to say too much about that. If people
which is really the concern. My apologies, Dr. Adetifa. Which is really the concern? Because the question actually I'm asking is, the government's work is cut out for government, but what the people need to do is of concern, which raises the question of the fears of a resurgence of polio. Are these issues you raised anywhere connected? How can we ensure that it doesn't get any worse than it already is?
So we scored lower than we should, for example, in the area of vaccination coverage, which speaks to what you have just said about polio. Okay, the circulation and the emergence of mutant polio viruses is entirely about vaccination coverage. Okay, the ongoing diphtheria outbreak is about vaccination coverage. Outbreaks that we see of yellow fever, of measles, are all about vaccination coverage. The country is doing very well, actually, in terms of national vaccine access and delivery. What we need people to do is to now increasingly make use of all of the opportunities that government has provided at all levels to really get vaccinated. That will change things dramatically, not even for the purpose of, not just for the purpose of scoring, but even for protecting our health, reducing outbreaks, reducing suffering, and reducing deaths.
It really is a concern, but I'm pretty sure that it's something you have your hands on, and you and your team are doing wonderfully at it. Unfortunately, we're out of time now. Dr. Adetifa, I would have loved to continue this conversation, but thank you for your time this morning, and all the best to you. Dr. Ifedayo Adetifa is Director General, Nigeria Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Thank you again for what you do, and all the best.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So we're back right after now to talk about something else, which is, I consider, very important. Today is World Humanitarian Day. That's up next. Do stay with us.